Welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. This is Fiorenza and I'm your host. The purpose of this podcast is to bring voices together to talk about belonging. Through inspiring, real-life conversations, we explore how belonging can show up in so many different ways, what it feels like to belong, and the impact of truly belonging. Each episode will offer you inspiration and practical strategies to find your true voice in your life and as a leader. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, thank you for being here with me today for our new episode. Today we're going to be talking about belonging in the context of situations when we felt that we didn't belong, or maybe rather when we were made to feel that we didn't belong. And you know that this podcast is all about bringing voices together with the idea, with a mission to inspire you, and maybe, you can get something that resonates that you can take away. So I'll share an example, but of course we'll hear from some more voices. We have some very inspiring guests today. As you may know, I'm multicultural. I have an Italian and Turkish heritage. I was born and I grew up in France before moving to London in 2010. I very much identify with being French, and that has been the case growing up. But I'm also very much aware that there's another culture, there's another dimension of me, and I specifically really resonate with my Italian roots and identity. So I grew up in France, like I mentioned, and I remember very clearly in teenage years or in my years at university, I would go to a social event. And, when I would meet people that haven't met yet, so I was meeting people for the first time, quite often the first question that I'd be asked would be around where I'm from. The famous question, where are you from? And I totally appreciate now that there's certainly different angles that people come from when they ask that question. Maybe it is genuine curiosity. There's a lot that the tone also indicates in terms of what's the intent for that question. But, I really think that there's also a timing to ask that question. And certainly when that question kind of is, part of the first sentences that you exchange with someone, it's very rare that it's taken in the right way. So where are you from? I was asked this question. And really for me, that question sounded super awkward because I was from the same place. I grew up there. I was from the exact same place as the person who was asking me this question. Reflecting back, I know that it wasn't an inclusive question. And probably it wasn't an inclusive environment as well, most of the time, because it made me feel that I didn't belong. How do we define belonging, actually? What's belonging in layman terms? Belonging is the perception that a person belongs to a group, and that this person is an accepted and essential member. The feeling of belonging is a powerful human emotion that leads to people being their authentic selves without having to hide any aspect of who they are. Belonging clears barrier to being inclusive. You are appreciated for your unique background in a psychologically safe environment. And I think it's also interesting to note what is your own personal definition of belonging and what it brings up for you. For example, for me, there are a few layers to what belonging is about. The first step is to know ourselves, exploring who we are, knowing our uniqueness, our strengths. What does that mean for us? How can we show up in a way that can honor that? And to me, that becomes the anchor. Our anchor, my anchor. My anchor is so important, especially in situations that are not being so inclusive. My anchor brings me back and allows me to stay connected with my whole person and who I really am. In moments when you feel or you are made to feel that you don't belong, like the example that I shared earlier, think about how you can find an anchor that can support you. So, in other words, can we belong to our true self, our values, and what we stand for, first and foremost? Think of an organization that you felt you belonged to, past or present. How there may have been moments where you saw that you should or maybe should not do this or that because of the work you do, and this isn't in alignment with my role, right? Think of the times you decided not to pursue something because it was not in alignment with one of your cultural norms or values or beliefs. What if, in the same way, you could honor your belonging to yourself, standing for the alignment to your own core values, for example? This could be your belonging anchor, a place within you that you can return to anytime. And what would you need to access that anchor in a challenging situation, maybe a moment when you are made to feel that you don't belong? What do you need to do or say or access? Let's hear from Tanisha Dayal. Tanisha is currently a DE&I consultant for the Resource Key. She is from India and currently based in Ireland. She's been working her way to understanding visibility laws, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tanisha is inspiring, and from the first time we met, I felt her passion to help minority communities. Tanisha's story today speaks about invisible differences that, once known by others, made her feel that she did not belong.
That one situation I experienced as a deaf woman in my everyday life that has existed since I was a child is constantly battling to try and understand everyone speaking around me. I am profoundly deaf, but I do know how to speak, which hides my disability all the time while having a conversation. People do not tend to realize that I'm actually deaf and I'm struggling to understand everything they speak with me. In a setting where there are many more people, it takes a lot more effort to lip read everyone and to try understand different body languages, accents, hand movements, and so on expressed by everyone involved. Of course, it is exhausting, and when I muster up the courage to ask someone to repeat some sentences or a part of the conversation for me, the responses in the majority I receive is getting dismissed, expressing irritation, or saying that, oh, it's not that important, or even shrugging it off in front of me. It really puts me back into my shell and makes me wonder whether I would ever feel included.
I asked Tanisha if, in hindsight, there could have been something, anything, that could have been helpful to navigate this situation.
The most simple thing to do is actually be mindful and kind. It is very appreciated to first ask whether I am feeling okay and that if I need something to feel supported in a formal or informal conversation. I would have also appreciated someone saying that they would let me know about it later or at the end of the conversation. One can also share the support by ensuring that am given extra attention while involving me in last conversation. They could also share the opportunity to message me personally or even have the repeater speak themselves one more. If I have asked you for your support to understand something that I have not, please know that it took every bit of courage inside me to trust you in that moment to make myself feel included with your help. These are the helpful strategies that I have developed for myself with my personal experiences with regards to the disability that I have to navigate such situations. Please know that I only speak for myself in this context and not all the strategies will be applicable to every deaf individual you meet.
Thank you, Tanisha, for sharing these thoughtful strategies with our community. Being mindful of what we say. This is such a simple yet so powerful strategy that Tanisha shared with us. It's not about what we intend to say, but it's also how you're saying it, the impact it can have on other people. realizing that what someone is sharing with us, maybe that wasn't easy. That wasn't easy to say it or to actually get to the point when we are ready to share. Let's now hear from Chong Hiu. After 9 years of working at Deutsche Bank as a staff development specialist, Pun is now a learning and training consultant in Munich, Germany. Pun's story today is one of starting a new job, starting a new life on the other side of the world. So that is certainly a great example of finding a way to belong in a place where at first doesn't feel like you belong. Let's hear it from Pun.
Hello, my name is Pan. I come from Hong Kong, but I moved to Germany already some years ago. To talk about sense of belonging, I want to use an example from my previous workplace. In my previous job, it is a very multicultural environment. I have colleagues from all over the world, and we are all quite new to the city or to the company. So it is not easy to find the sense of belonging. I start to think how I can connect with my colleagues and the workplace better. So I start with my passion. I like to go to concert, museum, theater, movies a lot. And then I think, how about once a month, I organize some after work event and invite colleagues to join. Staff on my team, for example. And then later on, I found the events get very positive response because most of my colleagues in Berlin, they are also quite new to Berlin and new to the company. And they also can find sense of belonging through joining these events. So we go bigger and bigger, more and more colleagues to join. The event frequency from once a month to once a week. And then the scale go from my team to my department and then to the whole building. And later on, because it's so well received, I set up arts and social committee and even get sponsorship from the head of the company and to continue to organize event and make myself and my colleagues all can feel sense of belonging more. So what I learned in this story is to find a sense of belonging, start with your passion and find your tribe through the value you can offer to others.
I love just how practical the strategies shared by Poon are. I remember moving to London and starting afresh. It was challenging and it's been hard to find my people and build a local community. If, like him, you just moved to a new place, what could you try? How could his experience be a learning to you? Let's now hear from Dawn Ward, People and Culture Associate Director at Waterstons. Dawn's story is one of how to make the best of a short-term experience when we get to a place that we know we're in for a short period of time. Thanks to that experience, Dawn also shares how it gave her ideas to be of a better support for the society.
Recently, I travelled to Sydney for work, which was just a brilliant opportunity and a really privileged position to be in. So caveat it at the very beginning with that. It was something that I asked to do, so not something that was required of me either. So certainly something that I'd been kind of really looking forward to. I travelled out to Sydney at the beginning of April, and I think I just was completely unprepared for what that would be like. I've travelled before, I've travelled on my own, I've travelled long haul. I'd made quite a few assumptions really about what that would be like. As a reasonably independent person, someone with good support networks and all the rest of it, and someone who's felt generally safe throughout their life and supported and like I belong. I was 22, 23 weeks pregnant at the time, and I think that's the first time I've ever travelled alone during pregnancy, first baby. So there's a lot going on. Got to Australia. Now, I was visiting Sydney. They've been suffering with really, really bad weather, quite severe flooding. I was staying in a district that I'd never heard of. I'd done a bit of research, been recommended. But it was really ironic that this opportunity to speak about belonging came up at the same time, because it is one of the first significant moments in my life where I looked around and thought, oh my goodness, nobody looks like me. Nobody sounds like me. I don't know where I am. This might be a Western country who speaks the same language. For that, I'm hugely thankful. But it was a community that had a high Asian population. So people did not look anything like me. Lots of different language, lots of different cultures, lots of different people around that I guess I just couldn't assimilate myself to. People that you don't know, usually, people are friendly enough, but you arrive, you're jet lagged, you're tired out, and you all of a sudden don't recognise anything. And it just got me thinking about what that must be like on a much more significant basis, on a longer term basis, to be somewhere where you don't feel like you belong. I felt unsettled. It got me thinking, and while I was away, I was lucky enough to spend some time, had a couple of days off at the weekend, and I was reading an article about the refugee crisis in the UK and some of the ongoing discussions within Parliament. And there was an article with some representation from refugees, and the proportion, which I won't misquote because I can't remember so exactly the figures, but they were very, very high. The proportion of people who just felt so unsafe even when they got here to the UK. And it made me really sad, because I thought, I've had a very small insight into what it's like to arrive somewhere that's not familiar and that I don't recognise and that I feel, unsettled in. But I know that this is something that, I wanted, and I am safe, and I do speak the language, and I've got access to support through my network. I've got access to finances if I need to do anything. And it just made me think, wow, what a privileged position to be in. And I think that really helped get me through. When I think about strategies that could have helped, my situation's obviously a very privileged one to be in, and of the bigger picture, there's obvious things I could have done more of. I could have researched more. I could have talked to people locally more in the office that I was visiting. I also think there's an element of jet lag and pregnancy hormones that I just, are inevitable. But I think when I thought about the question, what could have helped me prepare, what strategies could have been useful, I think actually while I was there, taking a step back, because if I'm 100% honest, I thought about turning right back round and just getting a flight home, because I just did not feel like I belonged, that I wanted to be there, that I didn't, it just didn't feel like home. And for people who aren't in that situation, and obviously I didn't, I stayed, but I just took a step back. I took a couple of days and I thought about why I was really feeling like that. I talked to people close to me, and sought, some advice and some support, really some counsel from those who I trust. And again, that's a really lucky position to be in, that I had that. I think it's really good to reflect on how fortunate we are. But for those who aren't so fortunate, knowing that there are people out there who want to help and support. And I think it's hugely important that we as a society think more about how we can make others feel welcome and try and draw on our own experiences, mine being one that was, short term, again, something that I was really grateful to have the opportunity to do. But hopefully I can use that taking forward to think about how, whether it's in my career, whether it's in my personal life, whether it's just being in society, how I can perhaps think about things from others' perspectives and ensure that, we talk about these things, because whether it might feel trivial or not to us, there are people going through significant hardship, people who will have life events that are completely out of their control, who won't have, the wherewithal, the infrastructure around them, as I did. And I hope that this experience will certainly teach me, and it has taught me, how lucky I am, but also to think more about when there's significant things going on in personal, professional life. Taking a step back, sitting with your emotions and seeking advice is really something that I can't advocate for enough.
You can follow the podcast on LinkedIn at the Belonging Project Podcast. You can also hit subscribe and stay up to date with our episodes. And do feel free to get in touch with me on coaching@fiorenzarossini.com. Thank you again, and see you next time.